We lived at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in central New Jersey. My parents loved Halloween more than any other holiday. Weeks before October 31st, my dad would drag dusty boxes out of the attic marked Carnival, Graveyard Asylum. Each year, he chose a new theme for our yard. When I was 14, he decided on Haunted Carnival. He built a mini-ticket booth, strung old-fashioned globe lights around the porch, and set up the centerpiece, a fortune-teller booth with a mannequin dressed in a sequin top, shawl, and bangles. He wired a motion sensor to make the mannequin raise a hand and light up her crystal ball whenever someone stepped close. It creeped me out even when she was turned off. Halloween that year fell on a Friday. My dad took my little brother Tommy trick-or-treating, while Mom and I stayed home to hand out candy. From sunset onward, a constant stream of kids and teenagers made their way up our driveway. The fortune teller was a hit. Kids shrieked and laughed when her head turned toward them. Around 8:30 p.m., my mom went inside to warm up apple cider. I sat on the porch swing, my legs wrapped in a blanket, passing out candy to a group of middle school girls dressed as witches. They pointed at the booth, whispering to each other. One of them asked me if there was a real person inside. I said no and tapped the mannequin's crystal ball to prove it was plastic. Later that night, close to 10 o'clock, I noticed the street had emptied. Orange porch lights flickered off one by one. I was about to go inside when a group of boys walked up. They were older, maybe juniors in high school, and all dressed in zombie makeup. One of them, tall and lanky, leaned toward the fortune teller. "Nice setup," he said, eyes on the mannequin. I swear her eyes moved. I laughed. "It's just on a sensor," I explained. The boys collected their candy and stumbled off down the dark street. Minutes later, I heard slow footsteps on the gravel. I looked up to see a figure at the bottom of our driveway. He was tall, taller than my dad, and wore a floor-length black cloak with a deep hood that concealed his face. He moved with a strange stiffness, almost gliding up the path. As he stepped into the light, I noticed he wore black gloves and carried a pillowcase by his side. He stopped right in front of me and held the bag open without a word. "Happy Halloween," I said, dropping 2 fun-sized bars inside. "Sorry, we're almost out." He didn't respond. He tilted his head slowly as if listening to something. Then he whispered, barely audible over the hum of the porch lights, "Your fortune is wrong." His voice was metallic, like air passing through a hollow tube. A chill ran up my spine. "Excuse me?" I asked. He turned his head toward the fortune teller booth and held that gaze for a full 5 seconds. Then he walked away, disappearing down the sidewalk between 2 houses. I watched, expecting him to join friends on the street, but he never emerged. I told myself it was just some bored teenager trying to be creepy. When Dad and Tommy returned a half hour later, I helped bring decorations inside. We started with the fortune teller booth. I stepped up to unplug the motion sensor. My hand brushed the curtain through the slit. I saw a face that wasn't plastic. It was the cloaked man. He sat on the stool in the booth, hands folded neatly on the table, head tilted slightly downward. His hood still concealed his features, but I could see the pale skin of his chin. His chest rose and fell shallow and slow, like someone in meditation. For a second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. Then adrenaline kicked in. I screamed for my dad. The man didn't move. Dad came running, but when he ripped open the curtain, the booth was empty. The mannequin lay in the grass several feet away, its head detached. We never saw the cloaked man again. A neighbor later told my mom that a man dressed similarly had been seen walking around our town 2 Halloweens prior, staring into decorated windows. Police looked for him but never caught him. The following year, my dad chose a safer theme, pirate ship, and the fortune teller remained boxed in the attic. When I was a kid, Mrs. Green lived alone 3 doors down. She was in her late 60s, widowed, and one of those neighbors everyone trusted. She baked pies for new families and always had a bowl of Werther's Originals on her coffee table. Every Halloween, she went all out: spiderwebs, orange candles, and homemade popcorn balls. Since she tired easily, she had started leaving a large plastic cauldron of candy on her porch with a handwritten sign, "Take 2. Knock if you need anything." Happy Halloween, Mrs. Green. One particularly cold Halloween, my parents noticed fewer kids out. By 8 o'clock, rain began to fall in sheets. Most porch lights turned off. Early around 8:30, Mrs. Green decided to bring the candy cauldron inside so raccoons wouldn't get into it. She peered through her peephole, saw the street empty, and opened the door. Rain blew in as she lifted the cauldron. It felt heavier than it should have. When she looked inside, it was still nearly full. She smiled, thinking the weather had saved her from having to bake extra cookies for trick-or-treaters, and carried it to the kitchen. She set it on the table, closed the curtains against the storm, turned off the porch light, and went to bed with a book. Mrs. Green was a light sleeper. Around 2 a.m., she woke to the sound of distant giggling. At first, she assumed it was the neighborhood teenagers, those same kids who sometimes toilet-papered houses. But the giggling grew louder, joined by soft footsteps and the distinct crinkle of candy wrappers. The sounds weren't outside. They were in her house. Heart pounding, she slipped on her slippers and grabbed a flashlight. The hallway was dark and cold. As she approached the kitchen, she smelled chocolate and caramel, like a candy shop. Her flashlight beam bounced off shiny wrappers strewn across the hardwood. The cauldron sat on the table, lid askew. Something moved in the corner of her eye. She swung the light toward it, but only saw her reflection in the window. "Who's there?" She called, her voice shaking. The giggling stopped. For a moment, there was only the sound of rain hitting the roof. She reached for the lid of the cauldron. Just as she placed her hand on the handle, a tiny, cold breath tickled her ear, and a child's voice whispered, "We follow the note." Mrs. Green dropped the lid with a scream. It clattered to the floor. She backed against the counter, scanning the room. There was no one there. She could see her own breath in the beam of the flashlight. The kitchen temperature had dropped. Drawn by something she couldn't explain, she looked down at the cauldron. Impressions pressed against the plastic from the inside, as if small hands were pushing out. The cauldron wobbled, then stilled. Too frightened to clean up, she hurried back to her bedroom, locked the door, and lay awake until morning. When daylight finally filtered through the curtains, she ventured out. The kitchen looked normal. The candy was all gone, the wrappers neatly piled beside the cauldron. Muddy prints the size of a child's foot led from the front door to the table and back, but they weren't smeared like normal footprints. Each print was perfect, as if stamped. Later that day, Mrs. Green told my mother what happened. My mom remembered that Mrs. Green had lost her only son, Eric, on Halloween night many years earlier in a hit-and-run. Mrs. Green kept all of his old costumes and would hang his Frankenstein mask by the door each year. She believed he still visited her on Halloween. That night, she found a mask on the kitchen table, covered in tiny chocolate fingerprints. After that, she stopped leaving the candy out. Instead, she sat on her porch, rain or shine, handing candy directly to each child and gazing a little longer at those who reminded her of a boy she once knew. My name is Ben. I'm 26 now, but this happened a few years ago during my junior year of college. I had landed a fall internship that required me to house sit and dog sit for my history professor. He and his wife were flying to Europe for 2 weeks, and they offered me free lodging in their suburban Ohio home if I watched their golden retriever Baxter. The house was in one of those identical neighborhoods. Every driveway curved the same way. Every mailbox was the same height. It was the kind of place where the homeowners association had rules about the shade of white your trim could be. When I arrived, my professor gave me the rundown. Baxter needed to be let out twice a day. No parties, no smoking, and don't be alarmed if the neighbors play pranks around Halloween. They're harmless, he laughed. Last year, someone replaced all the mailboxes with pumpkins. It seemed quaint compared to the city pranks I'd grown up with. The first week passed quietly. Kids rang the bell after school, selling chocolate bars for fundraisers. I took Baxter on long walks past tidy lawns and inflatable ghosts. On October 31st, I carved a jack-o'-lantern and set a bowl of candy on the porch. Trick-or-treating started at dusk. Parents in raincoats shepherded their kids from door to door. By 9 o'clock, the neighborhood lights began to turn off. I brought Baxter inside, bolted the door, and settled in the living room to binge a horror movie marathon. Baxter snored at my feet. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the landline rang. I remember the time because I glanced at the cable box clock as I reached for the cordless phone. No one had called the house all week. "Hello?" I said. For a moment, all I heard was static. Then a deep male voice whispered, "Have you checked on a dog?" The voice was muffled, as if coming through layers of cloth. It wasn't the professor. His tone was playful, and this voice sounded flat, emotionless. I looked down at Baxter. He was sleeping with his paws twitching, chasing something in his dream. "Who is this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. A ragged exhale crackled through the phone, followed by a faint sound like children humming a lullaby. Then the line went dead. I told myself one of the neighbors was messing with me. I unplugged the phone at the base, thinking if it rang again, I'd ignore it. I went into the kitchen to get water, leaving the cordless handset on the counter. As I stood by the sink, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye through the window above the sink. Someone walked up the driveway. The doorbell rang 3 times in a row, sharp quick. Baxter shot up, fur bristling, a low growl rumbling in his chest. I never heard him growl before. I crept down the hall and peeked through the peephole. The scarecrow stood on the porch, a full-sized human figure dressed in flannel and overalls with straw sticking out of its cuffs. A burlap sack covered its head, 2 dark eye holes cut into it. It stood motionless, facing the door. The only thing that moved was the wind gently lifting the straw at its leaves. "Can I help you?" I called through the door, hoping it was just a decoration someone had carried as a joke. The scarecrow didn't respond. After what felt like an eternity, it raised its right arm stiffly and extended its hand toward the welcome mat. In its palm was the cordless phone handset, the same one I'd left in the kitchen. I felt ice crawl along my spine. The scarecrow placed the handset gently on the mat, then lowered its arm. It stood still for a few seconds more. Then, with jerky, unnatural movements, it turned and walked away down the front path, swaying like a puppet on strings. When it reached the street, a motion sensor light flicked on. The sidewalk was empty. My heart hammered as I retrieved the handset. The base unit was still unplugged, yet the handset screen flashed one new message. Against my better judgment, I pressed play. Static, then that same flat voice, "Such a good boy." A distorted chuckle followed, and then something else, a sound like fabric scraping against with a thud, and finally the line clicked off. I called my professor's cell phone. It went to voicemail. I debated calling the police, but hesitated, worried I'd sound insane. I barricaded the front door with a chair and slept on the couch with Baxter at my side. Every creak made me flinch. The next morning, I walked the neighborhood with Baxter. Decorations looked a little sad in the daylight, leaves stuck to wet fake cobwebs. I mentioned the scarecrow to the neighbor watering his lawn. He frowned and said no one on our street dressed like that. He told me a story about a man years ago who had gone missing on Halloween and was later found in a cornfield tied to a stake and stuffed with straw. After that, strange prank calls and scarecrow sightings occasionally occurred around Halloween, always involving the house where the dog sitter stayed. When my professor returned, I told him everything. He tried to laugh it off, but noticed the scratches on the inside of the front door gouged into the wood about the height of Baxter's nose. We still don't know who called or how the phone ended up on the porch. To this day, whenever I hear an old landline ring, I feel my stomach drop. These suburban streets look calm, but they hold memories. Sometimes those memories manifest in strange ways: a cloaked stranger who knows your fortune, unseen children who still come looking for candy, or a voice that knows exactly what and who is inside your house. Halloween invites the uncanny to play at our front doors. The next time you carve a pumpkin or answer a late-night call, ask yourself, are you truly alone, or is someone or something watching from the darkness of your own familiar neighborhood? If you've ever had a creepy Halloween experience or something unsettling happen while you were home alone, share it in the comments below. I'd love to read them. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more true horror stories.